Abby, your office is so organized looking.
Oh, are you kidding?
I guess that's the signature of a busy, successful agent.
A lot of books.
A lot of books that you've had around you since you were a little girl, I think.
Yeah.
Let me introduce you briefly, and then we'll go right into our program with you. We're so looking forward to it. I think we really do have butterflies this time, Abby, because we know your experience, and we know you're going to be looking at these with a very professional eye tonight, and it's a small part of tonight's presentation. You're going to give us a very privileged glimpse into how you think as a professional in the children's publishing space, and it's a real precious thing for us. So we so appreciate your being here. Abigail Samoun was an in-house children's book editor for over 10 years, working on a wide range of projects, from board books to young adult novels. Her books received such honors as the Cooperative Children's Book Center's Charlotte Zolotow Award, the New York Public Library Ezra Jack Keats Award, and the Pura Belpre Prize. In 2011, Abigail made the transition from editing to agenting, and that's when Random House bought 10 Speed Press, and they had their own children's division, so that was the end of 10 Speed's children's division, where Abby was the editor, and also kind of worked as the erstwhile art director too, I think. Didn't you, Abby? You were kind of wearing...
Yeah, well, at Tricycle, the editors did a lot of the art directing. But we worked with the designers. The 10-speed designers worked on both the adult projects and the children's projects.
Both kinds of projects. Well,
yeah.
So in 2011, she made the transition from editing to agenting, co-founding Red Fox Literary with Karen Grensick. And what's so fun about Abby is, in addition to her 10 years of frontline experience as an editor, she's the author of 3 children's books. So she can see this this industry from so many sides, and we're going to try to talk her into showing her books in a minute. What's in Your Purse, that was published by Chronicle Books in 2014. How Gator Says Goodbye, and Now Hippo Says Hello, and this is part of a series for Sterling Publishing. And one Kickstarter project, and this is fascinating, Mind a Fire, The Visions of Tesla, an illustrated biography of Nikola Tesla with art by Elizabeth Heidel. Abby, that is the introduction. We're just so thrilled to have you with us, and you are going to take it from there. Let me put you up. Okay. Whether you can share your screen or not, we want to see you. So.
Okay. Am I up? Can you see me?
You are up. Yeah. I'll check with the group to make sure they can see you and hear us. Okay. Give me 1 second. Find the. I wanted to mention to you guys that if you hit the little gear wheel under the player, you can adjust the settings all the way up to high resolution, or YouTube's version of high res anyway, to 720 pixels. Just click that little gear. It's the settings icon, and then you can move your, if the resolution is looking a little fuzzy, because Google Hangout broadcasts these in high definition. Okay, Abby.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mark, for that lovely introduction. I think Mark gave you guys a pretty good idea of Red Fox Literary's history. I wanted to show you a few of the books that I've sold recently. This is a lovely little chapter book by Ginger Rue called Alakazam is a Wonder. It's the first in a series, the Alakazam series. And I remember when Ginger first told me about this this book, she said, "Wouldn't it be funny if there was a character named Alakazam?" and we kind of like chatted, and what could she do? What could she do? And what if she's able to stop time? And so this is a book about a little girl who finds that she has, on her 10th birthday, she's acquired the ability to stop time. And it's really fun. And this was a sale I was particularly proud of because I worked with Ginger on her first novel back when I was an editor at Tricycle Press. It was a middle grade called Brand New Emily. And that she was one of the first people I thought of when I became an agent about contacting, and she became my client. And I think we went through about 2 novels, submitting 2 novels that were rejected. And, you know, she was looking for her big break. And she got, in 1 year, she got a series with Sleeping Bear and then a series with Simon and Schuster. And it took us about, I think it was about 4 years of submitting manuscripts, submitting projects.
Wow.
Before we got those sales. So it's just, and I just read this book. I got the advance copy just about a week ago, and I read it in one sitting. It's so fun, and I'm so proud of Ginger. So there's that one. And then My Friend Maggie came out last year. This is by Hannah Harrison, and her first book was Extraordinary Jane. She was also an author, illustrator. I actually met her at an SCBWI conference in Oklahoma back when I was an editor, and loved her art. And she was also one of the first ones I contacted, one of the initial clients at Red Fox Literary. And her debut, it was our first auction, so that was very exciting. And it ended up going to Dial. And now she's working on this is her 3rd book with Dial. There was Bernice Gets Carried Away was the 2nd one. Then My Friend Maggie, and now she's working on a 4th one with a 5th contracted. So she's one of our big success stories, and her books are wonderful. They always have a lot of heart. This one I'm particularly fond of. It's about these 2 friends. They're friends from childhood, and they've grown up together. So you can see them as, you know, babies together. One's an elephant. That's Maggie. And then Paula is a beaver, I think. Yeah, not a badger, a beaver. And and so they're the best of friends. They do everything together. And then until Veronica comes along and tells Paula that she thinks Maggie is too big. And so then Paula starts to notice that Maggie is kind of clumsy. And her clothes are a little snug. And so she says she knows she should stick up for Maggie, but she plays with Veronica instead. So it's kind of this wonderful, you know, the politics of the schoolyard. And when it's done, the emotions of it are just so wonderful. Like you just see in Maggie's posture here, in her expression, it's just like your heart breaks, you know.
Talk about a strong visual character.
I know. Maggie's such a wonderful character. So of course, Veronica, being Veronica, starts making fun of Paula and calling her Bucky. Oh. Making fun of her buck teeth.
Yeah.
And who comes charging in to stand up for her? Maggie. And it's just such a sweet story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she says, "Don't you make fun of my friend." And then they kind of can see Paula feels bad, asks for forgiveness. And then they go off happily. So it's
that
a very
so sweet.
Yeah, it's a very spare, simple story, and there's so much communicated, and just the gesture and the facial expression, I mean, that's what makes Hannah such a wonderful picture book illustrator.
Oh, we'll put the links out to these books. I'll put them in the display box under the video, so everybody will see them and order them. Yeah.
And then we also had Normal Norman. That just recently came out with Sterling, and it's our illustrator, Stephen Britt. It's authored by Tara Lazar. who's not one of our clients. But Stefan did this book, and it's a really cute exploration about what is normal, and that normal is a very subjective thing, actually. That the normal gorilla, a normal gorilla probably wouldn't go to bed in a bunk bed, but you know, this guy likes bunk beds. So so it's really sweet. And then
now,
we also,
and that excuse me just a second, Abby. In that example where Tara has one agent, but you represent the illustrator, how did that come together?
So I visited Sterling. I try to go to New York a couple of times a year, and I visited Meredith there, Meredith Hart, who was the art director there, and I showed her our list of illustrators, and she, I think she knew Stefan, but hadn't seen some of his recent work, and really liked it. And she soon contacted me about this book, and so the art director was the one to reach out and pair him up with Tara's manuscript.
Okay.
So, and then we also do middle grade. This is a series with Balzer and Bray, an imprint of Harper, and it's kind of a neat story. Chris and Kevin, the authors, are best friends. They met each other in art school.
Oh, wow.
And they're both illustrators, and they co-wrote and co-illustrated this book. So, yeah. So that was a fun one to do with them. Then we also do illustrators who do book covers. Sarah Watts did this book cover for Penguin's The Toymaker's Apprentice by Sherry Smith. So
beautiful cover.
Yeah. And then we do nonfiction. This is a book called Fashion Rebels, published by Beyond Words, which is a division of Aladdin. And it's full color interiors. And this is an author who's also an illustrator. So yeah, she writes and illustrates. So that's a little sample. And then we also, this is fun. We also have a foreign rights division or agency that we work with called Rights People, and they sold one of our middle grades recently, and so we got a copy of it in Korean. Mm-hmm. So it was fun.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a cover by Sarah Watts too. So we represented both the author and the illustrator.
Sarah illustrated some of your books too, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. She's done the Little Traveler series.
The whole series. Okay.
Yeah.
How cute.
So that was a series that we did for Sterling, and it started out as a board books, individual board books, and then they packaged them together in this little suitcase because it's called the Little Traveler series. So it has like a little handle. And then you have these like little books inside that Sarah did.
They're little board books. Yeah.
Yeah, they're little board books. And what they do is they teach kids how to say hello and goodbye and thank you in the 7 most common languages in the world.
Excellent. So, yeah. What a great idea.
So I wanted to do a little presentation about the picture book process. I thought that would be helpful to you guys since most of you are illustrators. So I put together this little keynote presentation. Now I think I have to share my screen. Is it coming up?
Let's see. Not yet, but let's give it a minute. And it's that green rectangle.
Okay, let's see.
Green rectangle.
Okay, it says I am screen sharing.
Okay, and you are. I saw a glimmer of it. Oh,
great.
And now it's a toggle switch, Abby. So you might have just toggled it off because I was giving you the wrong sign. So toggle it back out. Just one click does it, turns it off or on.
Okay.
It was working. I saw it with my own eyes.
Is it working?
Yeah, now it is.
Okay. Let's see. Is it still working?
Yep.
Okay, great. So so I'm just kind of talk about how does it happen that some printouts from your computer become this beautiful, gorgeous, fully illustrated picture book.
Okay, Abby, the screen share is working, but your presentation isn't up, so it might be on another tab, or you might want to minimize the browser window so we can see your PowerPoint.
I see. Okay, hold on. Let's see. Is it coming up at all?
Gosh, I saw it a second ago. Where did you have it? But no, the answer is no, not yet.
Okay. Okay.
And it looks like you went right back out of screen share. So you might click screen share one time and then find it on your desktop.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I was doing like the full screen, maybe.
No, full screen was the right thing to do. But then you'll just have to pull that presentation front and center on your desktop. Just pretend you're working on your desktop.
Okay.
Okay, looks like you're about to share your screen. And there it is. We're seeing your presentation now. Great.
Okay.
Then it click back to you.
Okay. It doesn't like the full screen for some reason.
Huh.
Okay, so I'll just do it as a non-full screen.
See if we can do it.
Okay. Okay. So so here's a little shot of Simon and Schuster when I go to New York, and just always it's exciting to see Simon and Schuster up there, and big letters go up into this big multi-story building. And when I send off manuscripts to the editors there, they don't physically enter the building. They virtually enter the building. But so what happens? What happens when a manuscript enters the published building? So at Tricycle, we used to have, we did accept unsolicited manuscripts, unlike most publishers, most of the big publishers. And so we had something called the slush closet. So if any of you are a little squeamish, you might want to avert your eyes for the next.
Uh-oh. We can take it. We can take it.
You can take it? Okay. Good. Okay. So. We're getting closer and closer to the slush closet. There they are. Boxes and boxes of manuscripts.
It's not as bad as I thought. I was expecting that closet to be to the ceiling.
That was actually on a pretty good day. It has been worse. So that's part of the process. That's where a lot of authors start out. They start out in the slush bins, and it's just part of the process. And rejection letters are part of the process. I've been in this business for going on 17 years now, and I still get rejection letters every day for the projects that I send out. And you kind of learn to grow rejection calluses, so they don't sting quite as much. It's still not a great thing to see in your inbox or in your mailbox, but it's part of the process. So there's some little tips that I've learned over the years that help that can help you deal with rejection letters. And so one is to start a collection. So try to get it as wide an array of rejection letters from as wide a group of publishers, children's publishers, as you can. So get one from Viking, get one from Chronicle, get one from Charles Bridge, and then when you get a new one, you say, oh, great, another one for my collection. And then also respect their history. There have been some wonderful authors that were rejected time and time again. I live here in Sonoma, California, and the next town over is Glen Ellen, where Jack London lived. And there's a museum there to Jack London. And on one wall of the museum, it's practically wallpapered with like all the rejection letters he received over, you know, as he was starting out as a young writer. And people would say, you know, who wants to read about dogs in Alaska and in the Yukon? And your stories are too depressing. and you just see, like, you know, this man who became like one of the great American authors had to suffer through quite a number of rejections before he finally got his break. Another thing you might do is treat yourself every time you get a rejection letter. Buy yourself an ice cream cone. If you get 10 rejection letters, you get a new pair of shoes. The idea is to just get yourself used to sending out your work, getting it out there. Once you feel confident in your work, once you feel that you've gone through that initial time of developing your craft and you're ready to start submitting and be persistent, because a lot of the authors that are out there that are on the bookstore shelves, it's because of their persistence. Yes. I think that's the trait. Sometimes I think it's even more so than how much talent you have, but to be persistent is a key thing.
That would apply to illustrators, artists, as well as to the writers, or is there any distinction?
That's right. Definitely to the illustrators, because it's you know, it's a very competitive business, and but you have to keep growing and keep putting your stuff out there, keep developing your work, keep developing the craft, and then putting your work out there. I've seen a lot of very talented people give up. And actually, I have a story. One of the illustrators that I work with is Rosalind Bonnet. She's a French illustrator, and she was one of the first illustrators that I worked with as an agent. And we tried for about 3 years to have her break into the American market. She'd been well published in France, but her stories, even though I speak French, and so I was able to help her translate and adapt her stories to the American audience, her stories were still very French in tone and feel. And so it was, people loved her art. Editors always said, you know, this art is adorable, but the story is not working for us. And she was just on the verge of giving up. And then I said, well, wait, I have this wonderful author, Terry Sloat, and she just sent me this manuscript about these, it's accounting, it's called Zip Zoom on a Broom. And it's about witches at Halloween. And Rosalind did some samples for it, and we ended up selling it to Little Brown, and we'd had another offer from Scholastic, so 2 offers for that book. After 3 years of getting rejections and really being on the verge of saying, okay, I'm just going to go back to the French market and give up on being published in the States, she broke through and got it. So persistence is very key. And then if there's advice given in any of those rejection letters, really listen to it, because editors, if they are taking the time to write that extra little personal note, it means they see something in your work. If an art director, you know, notices something in particular about your work and encourages you to, you know, to work on your faces, or work on your the gestures, or try a different medium, really listen and consider that advice, because they're taking their time to, you know, they have a lot of artwork to look at, a lot of manuscripts to look at, and if they stop and take the time to write, to give some personal advice, that's something to listen to. And then if they do give you some personal feedback, be sure to follow up. Don't lose that connection that you've established there, because they will remember. And it's a way to just, get your little toe in the door and try to, edge in and make that door a little wider.
So you're not bothering them if you follow up a few months later with another art sample. You shouldn't think that way, because they have encouraged you with a note.
If they've given you some personal feedback and said, I really see something in your work, or I really, this one piece, it really stuck out for me. If they're giving you that kind of specific feedback, it means that they're, they are touched by your work in some way. So follow up with a postcard. Just keep in touch. Put them on your mailing list when you send out postcards, and try to cultivate that relationship. So okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the stages of the picture book development. And so sometimes what will happen is before the offer, the editor will take some time. If they do see something, if you don't get a rejection letter, if you get a letter that says, I'm interested in this manuscript, but it needs some work, I'm not ready to make an offer, what do you think about, doing this, that, or the other? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then after the offer, the stages of editing the manuscript. So to talk a little bit about the editor's role, the editor guides a project through the development stage. So they see a promising manuscript. Editors used to develop manuscripts a little more in the old days than they do now. Now they're really looking to acquire something that's really polished and ready to go. It depends on the houses, and it also depends on the editor. Some editors are more willing to develop something that they see as promising and with potential. A lot of them just don't have the time anymore to do that development work. So it can fall on the agent these days to develop a project with their author and get it, fairly well polished before sending it out. Or if you don't have an agent, it's the critique group. You really need a really good critique group to help you get to that stage where a project is really polished and ready to go out. So the editor is also the in-house champion for your project. So we just got a project acquired that was beautifully written. I paired it with one of our illustrators who does, Masha Dianes, who does this really gorgeous bright watercolors. And it was about a fashion icon who had a very strong following, very strong fan base, but wasn't necessarily like someone that kids would know. And so it was going to be a beautiful picture book about a creative person and their creative life, but it wasn't like an immediate, slam dunk in terms of like marketing and publicity. But the editor really loved the manuscript. She really wanted to work with the illustrator, and so she championed the project in-house and convinced her marketing people to take a chance on it. So one of the editor's most important roles is to be that in-house champion for a book. The editor also helps nourish the author's creativity. Agent does that too. It also depends on the house. Like there are some houses where the editor has a long-standing relationship with the author, and they work on project after project over the course of years. And they'll talk about which project to work on next, and the editor will really offer a lot of guidance. And other houses, other editors, their style is much more businesslike, and okay, we're doing this project together. Here's some edits. Thank you for, you know, the revision. I'll get this back to you for copy edit. And it's like much more like, okay, you know, we're doing this together. This is how these are the deadlines, and there's not a lot of personal interaction. They don't know the names of your kids necessarily. They don't. So it just depends from house to house, editor to editor. But at every house, the editor's role is one, to offer guidance and suggestions, and also to be the keeper of the story's logic and clarity. If the curtains are purple on page 3, they need to be purple on page 50, unless something terrible has happened to the curtains.
Does this include illustration, keeper of logic and clarity for the illustrator as well as the author, Abby, for the this as part of the editor's role?
Yeah, I mean, the art director, it depends on
the
if the editor is the contact for the illustrator, or if the art director. In most houses, the art director will give feedback. So I think it's for illustrations, it's a little more, it's either the editor or the art director. But the editor is usually the one that will notice those small details. The art director is more focused on layouts, on the art itself. The editors tend to be more detail oriented, so they're usually the ones who keep track of the little details like that. And then there's also the proofreader. At the very end of the process, we'll go through, and when they proofread a picture book, they will look at the art and try to make sure that that everything is consistent throughout. But in the end, it is the editor's project, and they're the last set of eyes on that project before it goes to the printers. So so the editor has to make sure when the project is ready to go to ship to the printer that everything is as it needs to be, that the art is consistent, there's no mistakes in the text. You know, it was, when I was an editor, it was pretty nerve-wracking to have that responsibility of not a comma should be out of place. There should not be a M dash where an N dash needs to be. There should be, you know, I was the final set of eyes on that book. And if there was a mistake, it fell on me. So,
well, all the money invested in that book, particularly a picture book, I mean, that's a huge investment on the part of a company. So
it is. And you know, and some of those mistakes, they're small. There's you know, a comma missing, or there's a double space instead of a single space. And but you know, as an editor, those things just are the things that keep you up at night.
Wow.
So like I said, it depends from house to house who the contact person is with the illustrator. If that person is the art director, if that person is the editor. So different houses work in different ways. At Tricycle, the editor was the contact person for the illustrator, and we worked with art directors, but we were the ones to kind of consolidate the information from the art director and pass it along to the illustrator. So, and then, you know, we also communicate with the production staff, the designers, and make sure that the project is moving along according to schedule. So, okay, so let's see. So some of the questions that editors ask themselves before the offer stage is, does the proposed format suit the story or the intended audience? So is this really a picture book, or is it really a chapter book in disguise? Is this picture book, is the text really oriented to an older readership? So you kind of have to think, is is the text, is the story itself too slight to be a picture book? Is it really, would it work better in a magazine format, as a magazine piece? Because you have to think, like, picture books nowadays, they're selling for $15.99, $16.99. They're expensive. You want something that has like real meat and that really stands up to multiple readings. So if the picture book is too slight, maybe the picture book format is not the best format for this particular story. So, and it's funny how often I see this in manuscripts that come in, where I see the, you know, the character is too old to be a picture book hero. The topic is too mature for a picture book audience. There's just not enough story for this to hold up as a picture book. So this is a very important question that should be asked early on in the process. The story arc, looking at the story arc, does this have a satisfying beginning, middle, and end? Does it flow from one stage to the other? Are all stages of the story well developed? And is the conclusion satisfying?
That goes for fiction and nonfiction alike,
Yeah,
I assume.
that's right. Yeah, nonfiction too. Point of view, is this the best point of view for the story? Should it be told in first person? Should it be told from this character's point of view? Should it be told in a limited omniscient point of view? So that's always an interesting question to ask. It may be, you know, sometimes authors haven't even considered that. They've just started writing the story and it sort of automatically, you know, went into this particular point of view. But if you take a step back and look at the story, is this point of view the best way to tell the story? Another consideration for picture books is back matter and front matter. If the story has a science topic, does it need some back matter to go more in depth into this particular subject, science subject? Or is there an author's note? Does it need an author's note? Does it need a glossary? So those considerations. So editors will consider these questions, and sometimes they'll write a development letter to the author to ask for revision. And agents will do this too. When you submit to an agent may say, I see some promise in this, but this is where it needs work. So the revision process, this is your brain on revision. Any questions? Well, we can't help you, our brain's melted. So revision is, some authors love it, some authors can't stand it. But a good reviser will listen carefully to critiques, be willing to experiment. So if an editor or agent suggests a different point of view, try it out. It's not really gonna hurt anything to just try it out. Or try, you know, starting the story on page 3 or page 20. It's a time to, you know, before you sell the book, this is your time to really play around and to not have any darlings that you're unwilling to kill. You know, you have to experiment, be willing to move things around, try things out in different ways, and ask yourself questions that will allow you to dig deeper into the themes, the character, and the plot of your story.
That's an interesting thought. This is a playful stage for
it is
for the writer to think of that as that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a word for it. Playful tinkering, I think, is the term that I have heard before. Just kind of tinkering with the story and trying things out and not being afraid to try things out. I mean, we tend to, once we have that initial draft, to say, okay, this is it, you know, and you can do line edits, but you kind of think, oh, okay, well, this has the general structure that I'm, you know, that I'm happy with, but don't cement yourself down too quickly in your story. Let it be flexible for a while.
When you were editor, Abby, what would you say was the percentage of books that you'd be working on where you had to come back to the author or author illustrator and make some revisions, and it required for the story to go through kind of a big revision process, revising process, where you just didn't know how it was going to come out? Was that a goodly percentage of the books that ultimately?
Well, every book I worked on needed some revision, at least, you know, at least one good round of revision. Mm-hmm. Some books needed more than others. I mean, if you as an editor, if you find yourself revising and revising and revising with an author, that can be a frustrating process. Mm-hmm. You know, with a novel, 3 rounds of revision is not unheard of. Mm-hmm. But especially these days, like I said, editors are looking for projects that are pretty well polished. They might need a round of line edits, a little bit of maybe a little bit of moving around of some scenes, but generally it's pretty solid. Okay. So any work that needs to be done, you should do it with your agent or with your critique group, and really learn yourself how to be a good reviser, and to seek out those, you know, collaborators that will help you get your manuscript to the point where it's pretty solid and pretty ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys saw the movie Genius about Thomas Wolfe and his editor, Max Wolfe.
I so wanted to see that. It's on my list, but I haven't seen it yet. Have any of you guys seen it?
It's really,
now those were the days, right, of the editor.
Yeah, I know. And that poor editor to have like the manuscript delivered in carts, like in these like huge shipping crates. The poor guy. Oh my God, I would die.
Thomas Wolfe was unique in his.
Yes. But you know, those were the days where editors like had their authors that they cultivated over the course of years, and and they would do those very thorough, deep revisions. But you know, editors are so they're expected to juggle like 20 different projects, 25 different projects at a time. And they just can't afford to invest that kind of time in developing a project that they used to. So you can see like talented people out there, and you try to give them little encouragements and say, you know, keep sending me some work. But even if a manuscript is promising, they are the ones that need to do the work before they can expect to be acquired. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a picture book that I worked on when I was at Tricycle, called The Day We Danced in Underpants. And the author is Sarah Wilson. And so we received this manuscript. I thought it was adorable. It was, and of course I have like a weakness for stories set in France, because I'm from France originally. And so it starts out, Papa bought a pair of pants, sunny dappled dancing pants, and off we went to travel France with 2 big dogs and 3 wild ants. The ants and dogs all loved to sing, and so we had a summer fling. Well, Papa, so this is the first, what you see here on screen is the first draft of it. So I circulated the manuscript. We had some editorial meetings. And And I worked with Sarah on the rhyme scheme, because with rhyming books, the rhymes have to be just so. Every rhyme has to work without feeling forced. And so rhyming manuscripts, you need to go over them and over them and over them until they just flow. And you have to be able to sing them. That there can't be a rhythm that you stumble over. So they need quite a bit of tinkering. So we were looking at the rhyme scheme, we were looking at the language level, the ending. We had to go over several different versions for the ending. So there's one version that you see here on screen. This was version 2 and 3. And then finally we settled on ending number 4. So it took quite a bit of tinkering with that one. And then once we felt we had a pretty solid ending, we made an offer on it. And one of the things that editors will do when they make an offer is create a tip sheet. And a tip sheet is, it asks a series of questions about a project. So you want a one-line description of the book. You have to be able to tell the story of the book in one line. Sometimes this is called the elevator pitch. You also want to ask, why do we want to acquire this title? So this is a tip sheet that I had drawn up for a book called Little Goose's Trip Around the World. And the one-line description is, Little Goose sets off on a journey around the pond in search of something that makes him feel cozy and comfy and happy too. So I estimated the target age is 3 to 5. This would be a 32-page full-color book. I also started thinking about trim sizes. Why we acquired this title. So this was a manuscript we found in the slush pile, and I said it was this classic combination of expressive illustration and a comforting story about motherly love. It could be the read-aloud book sellers look for every season. So here's some questions. Why should the publisher acquire the book? Who is the target audience? Who will buy this book? What are the competitive titles? And this is really important early on when you're when you first have your first draft of a manuscript. Look on Amazon and see what other titles are out there. If you've got like a really great picture book biography of Josephine Baker, and you go on Amazon and you see, oh my God, there's this big biography, a picture book biography of Josephine Baker that just came out a year ago, and it got all these awards and all this recognition. It's going to be really hard to sell that book at this point. So you want to know what you're dealing with. If you have a picture book manuscript, you want to know like what other picture books out there are going to compete with it. Is there room in the marketplace for this title? What are the key selling points? And then always these days, an author has to consider their platform. What resource do you have to promote your book? Do you have a big Instagram following? Do you have a blog? Are you a teacher that can speak to kids and go and directly into the classroom and do presentations for kids? Are you a librarian? You know, there's different ways to build your platform as an author. Are you known for as a authority on a particular subject? So so we consider all these things. This was another book. It was a picture book biography of the Mexican-American artist Martin Ramirez. So the one-line description was a biography of the Mexican immigrant and mid-20th century outsider artist Martin Ramirez, who created masterpieces using unusual materials such as bread, candy wrappers, and matchsticks, while confined to a Stockton, California psychiatric ward. So this was set in the 30s, and I thought it was interesting because it showed that creativity can flourish in the most difficult environments. And the fact that he used materials like candy wrappers and matchsticks, it seems to have such a child appeal that kids will, you know, just use the objects around them to play with. They don't necessarily see a matchstick as a matchstick. They see a matchstick as, oh, this is a little, you know, figure that, you know, little man. And and Martin Ramirez had that playfulness with his artwork, and he was incredibly resourceful, and his art was a way to escape his difficult life as a Mexican immigrant and as someone who you know, had mental health issues, and so but he was able through his art to escape all that, and I thought it was a very inspiring story. So I included a bio of the author. He was great at publicizing his book. He had gotten appearances on CNN, Fresh Air, Weekend Edition. So he was a lecturer. So he had a pretty strong platform. And then the reasons for acquiring. So this is where I kind of put my passion for the project in the tip sheet. So Martin's story suggests important themes that even outsiders have important contributions to make to the greater society, that immigration brings with it sacrifices, and that art has the power to bring hope and beauty to even the most desperate situations. So potential selling points. You know, this one, it would be up for awards like the Pure Belle Prey, TLA promotion, the arts market. Considering all these things. And then the market, I put trade, library, educational, and museum. So there's these different markets. This is one thing to look at. There's different markets to consider as you start thinking about your book being out there in the world. Is it going to be a trade book that's sold in independent bookstores and chain bookstores? Is it a book that's for a general audience? Those are trade books. Then there's specialty publishers that are, you know, like the national parks has a publishing programs. There are regional books. There's a publisher here in California called Heyday Books that specializes on books about California history and California culture. So so there are some publishers out there that are very specific and that deal with specific subject matter. Then there are mass market publishers that are generally dominated by brand names, Dora the Explorer, SpongeBob. These generally sell to the big box retailers like Costco, Walmart, and Target. Generally, we're not so concerned with those because they are so brand dominated. But it's good to be aware that's part of the market too. Then there's the institutional educational market, selling primarily to schools and libraries. And there's publishers like Millbrook, Charles Bridge. They're a big part of their sales are institutional library sales. So they tend to focus on books with strong educational content. And then there are novelty publishers like Piggy Toes Press, Klutz Press. There's one called Pity Books. I'm forgetting now what it's called, but these are publishers that do like Lift the Flap, pop-up books, activity books. So this is all part of the children's book market. So you know, if you have a book that's set in Alaska, that's about an Alaskan animal. There are presses out there that do specialize on that regional topics. So there's Sasquatch books, for instance, up in Washington will do Less Canna books. So, be aware of, there's not just the big 6 publishers. There's the U.S. has the widest marketplace of publishers in the world, and a lot of foreign illustrators want to get into the American market because it's so broad. So it's good to be aware of all the different possibilities out there for you. Okay, so we're kind of getting, we should probably speed up a little bit so that I can get to the illustration samples. So let's see. So illustration searches. So editors or art directors will look to agents for illustrators. They'll look at art samples coming in. When I visit editors in New York, I still see their bulletin boards full of postcards that they've gotten in through the mail. So those postcard mailings do still work. There are some websites that are kind of general illustration websites, Illustration Web, children'sillustrators.com. But places like Pinterest, Instagram, and Tumblr are becoming more of a place where editors and art directors will go seek out new up-and-coming illustrators. So it is good to have a strong Instagram account that you update pretty regularly with new work, and get your work on Pinterest too. So for the day we dance in underpants, as an editor, I was familiar with Esprit and Paris, which was Catherine Stock's book. So I looked at her sample, asked her to do some character studies, so you can see the different versions of the king here. Here's some inspiration that she drew from 18th century, set in in 18th century France. So. And you can see like the difference between how rough the thumbnail is here and the tight pencils. So as art directors and editors, they really have to use their imagination sometimes with thumbnails. And I love how she used this white tablecloth here to give us a nice space for the text to go on.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So another example, here's the sketch. This was the final piece. She used some lovely origami papers to as collage as part of the artwork. The progression from the very rough to tighter pencil to the final art.
Uh-huh.
This is the cover process.
Oh.
Okay, so yeah, and then just to finish up with some general tips. If you haven't already, join a CBWI. It's an incredible organization. And then, of course, join a critique group. It's important, so important now more than ever. And really find one that keeps you honest and keeps you working, and where you have good chemistry with the people that you're with, and that they'll meet on a regular basis. They are all dedicated as you are, and that you leave there feeling inspired. If you're leaving there feeling like, oh my God, what am I doing? I should just get out of
the wrong group.
business.
You don't want to spend 10 years in that group.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But you also want them to be honest with you and to know what you're capable of and to push you to do your best. So, and here are just some blogs that I love to follow. Fuse 8 is great. Betsy Byrne, one of the great picture book reviewers. And
a librarian, yeah.
And a librarian, New York Public Library. Kidlit 411 has great info. 7 Impossible Things Before Breakfast has
wonderful for illustrators. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Sensations, she's here. Cynthia Lydic Smith.
Yeah, she's in Texas. Awesome. Yeah.
Wonderful blog.
Yeah.
And you used to have a wonderful blog I wish you'd bring it back, Word Pavilions, Abby.
Oh,
That was a
yeah,
darling
that was a long
blog.
time ago. My God.
I love that blog. Yeah.
Ancient
I love the
history.
name of the blog. I loved it all.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful presentation. That is great for illustrators to hear this stuff. Do you encourage your illustrators to think about being author illustrators as well? Is that a wise direction for someone
I
who
mean,
has
if
that
you can
inclination?
do it opens you up to a lot of, am I still on screen?
No, now we're seeing you. You're off your screen share and we're seeing
Okay.
your webcam in your
Okay,
office there.
if you can write and illustrate, that's amazing. It kind of takes very different parts of the brain to do both.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not the easiest thing to do. It is easier, I think, to be an illustrator who writes than to be a writer who illustrates.
Yeah.
But you do have to try to get your writing up to the level of your art, and to work at both so that you're at a professional level at both, and
Yeah.
it's not always easy to do. So
Right.
if you can, that's great. If you have that, if you love words, if you love reading, then definitely go for it.
Okay.
It will put you in a much better position. You'll be able to be much more proactive as a author illustrator.
I want to ask you about the way you work with illustrators, but can we would this be a good time for us to take a few of the urgent questions from the group before we go into the pieces? Because I know they've been sort of piling up, and they do have some questions for you. And then I've got one or two questions for you, but I know we also need to go to the illustrations. Now I've got to scroll through pages and pages of their questions that came in. Okay, Carol has a question. Does the story arc need to be conflict-driven or at least problem-driven? Can it be enthusiasm-driven? I guess like a celebration of something. That's an interesting question.
Oh, so particularly for picture books? I think with picture books, there's more of a leeway. Novels, you definitely, to carry a reader through, 180 pages, you need to have conflict. I mean, sometimes the conflict, with picture books, I think you have a little more flexibility. It can be a celebration of something. I'm trying to think of
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of Peter Spear's books, like
books. What?
About the rain, Peter Spear, The Rain from the 70s, and that sort of.
Yeah. Or Yuri Shuliewicz's The Snow.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that with picture books, there does need to be some form of tension, something pulling the reader along. And an arc, even if it's gentle arc, there needs to be some sort of arc and a feeling of progression and a feeling of conclusion.
Yeah, songs need to have an arc, don't they? I mean, when you think about it, poetry.
Feel like a day. I was just reading Spring Thaw to my 4-year-old. I have a 4-year-old son, and it was a story about. It started out, the coldness of winter, but then as things were warming up, those signs of spring coming, and the ice breaking, and the birds starting to appear and building their nest. And so it was a very quiet sort of story, but there was this feeling of progression and going towards, from deep winter to the just the first little signs of spring.
Yes.
And then it was over the course of a day, so it ended with like the sun setting.
Movement and change.
Yeah.
I learned something from you just when we were chatting in our tech rehearsal the other day, and I wonder if it's a trend or because of the changing times, and that is that agencies are now taking illustrators seriously as part of their offerings to publishers? And you were saying you are receptive to illustrations, samples, so that you can think about pairing illustrators you know about with certain authors that you have and represent. And sometimes you'll make a pairing and submit it. The publisher has the option of not taking the pair. But can you talk a little, is this a new trend in agencies? Because it used to be that they weren't that interested in
Yeah,
illustrating.
yeah. And I think it depends on the publisher, again. Some art directors are still very protective of their territory and of the wanting to be the ones to pick out the illustrator for a project. But a lot of editors are looking for author illustrators these days. And I think that that's partly because they need to be able to sell the project to their sales and marketing people. And if they have a full dummy to show them, or if they have some really beautiful samples to show them, that can really help the editors sell the project in-house.
Oh, I got it, yeah.
And then it's also just more expedient. They don't have to go through the whole process of an illustration search, which can sometimes take a year to find just the right illustration.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time. So sometimes it works. I'll always tell editors we're open to other possibilities if you don't think that this illustrator is the right fit. But when it works, it's definitely a win-win for the author and the illustrator. The author doesn't have to wait for months to find out who's going to illustrate their book. And the illustrator doesn't have to wait to be contacted by an art director about a project. We can be more proactive and approach editors with this package.
Yeah, your agency website features portfolios of some of your illustrators, and it makes for great eye candy online.
I hope so. Yeah.
But I just find it interesting that it's almost that's what we used to see art reps doing with their clients, but you're in that, you're not art repping per se, but it's part of your
yeah, we do. I mean, there are other agencies that also represent illustrators. I guess, yeah, in the old days, there was more of a separation between the art reps and the literary agents that would represent the authors, and the art reps that would just represent the illustrators. But we're doing both. They're the yeah, and it does allow us to package projects better, and it's also harder these days to sell a picture book manuscript on its own. Some editors don't even want to look at picture book manuscripts that aren't from an author illustrator. They want.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
they want the whole deal and one personality, one creator.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah,
and
yeah, though they do seem to be open to having us match the author illustrator.
Got it. Okay. Glenda is asking, if an illustrator has different styles, would you still take them on and get them to focus on one style that you feel is marketable and distinct?
Yeah, if I see, it can take an illustrator a while to kind of find to find their groove, to find the style that really works for them, and that's really the most expressive of what they have to say as an illustrator. And sometimes an agent can help them along with that and say, you should really focus on this style and grow your portfolio, because as an agent, I really want my illustrators' portfolios to be consistent and to show a consistent style. And I'm looking for a style that's if you look at the Red Fox Literary website, all the illustrators have, there's a very diverse array of styles, but what I always look for is someone that has something personal to say, their own personal style that's not reminiscent, that doesn't look like it could, I've seen it a million times. I want something that really comes from them, that's really uniquely theirs. So sometimes I'll see illustrators that are just starting out and they're trying to they're trying to look more commercial. They're trying to to sell themselves as illustrators by making their art, taking their art away from the personal, making it more this more commercial looking, more something that they think will sell. And I really want them to focus on what is unique about your art. What is it that you have to say as an artist? I want it to come from inside out.
It's the same thing you look for in your authors, isn't it? A voice, like. Yeah,
exactly. It's the equivalent of an author's voice. And editors and agents, they look through so many submissions, so much work, and when we see so much that's just derivative, that we've seen a million times before, we're really looking for someone that has their own unique thing to say.
Yeah, very good. You want to look at the work in the folders online instead of on the YouTube player. That's another option. You can have two tabs up. Let me give it to you, Abby, first.
Okay.
Oh, you've already got it up. I didn't need to send you the link.
Yeah. So can you see the screen?
Yeah. I'm going to check and see what they're seeing at the same time. And I'm going to post. You guys, I'm going to post the folder link for you in case you want to go look at the pieces directly in the folder as Abby talks about them. I think that will click open for you.
Okay. You see Gabriel Esposito's?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So this is just a really darling little piece, and very picture book oriented. I love the kind of slightly skewed perspective here, with the barn sort of tilting and the little dog sort of reaching out with the worm. It just kind of brings a lot of what's the word? Dynamism?
It's a good dynamic.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. And then I also really like the just the delicacy of some of the details, the way that the bees are painted here, their little legs and the wings and the veining on the wings. It's really sweet, and the little details like the texture on the blue jeans. And I think this looks like it was done digitally, but there is still a painterly quality to it. That I like. It's not obviously digital. It has some texture. It has some painterly sort of texture to it. I mean, I think the leaves in the front, I would like to see them have a little more texture. There is something a little too obviously digital about those leaves. They don't seem quite as hand done. They seem a little bit, I don't know if it's a rubber stamp or, but the bees are so nicely delicate and individual, and the leaves there don't quite seem to, they seem a little bit rubber stamped like.
Okay. To set the parameters and to be clear, guys, and I think we made this clear in our communications with you, she's going to look at 9 or 10 pieces tonight. Don't despair if she doesn't call on your piece. She's using the pieces that she's selecting just to talk gently to all of us, telling us things we need to hear about submissions and she's seen so many of them. So we will keep your work up. We'll have a chance to look at them again in future sessions if Abby doesn't call on your piece tonight.
So this is Glenda. It's called Bird Watching, and I really like the line work here. just that sort of rough pencil quality. It has a lot of energy to it, a personality to it. I love the little red overalls, and something about her her arms, sort of like the elbow coming in. It seems like a little. I wonder if you would hold binoculars that way. Like it feels like the arm should be a little straighter. It's just like a little detail. I'm not sure what the yellow paint at the top sort of suggests. If she's outdoors and it's sunlight, I kind of wonder if we had something like a window frame, if that would give us just a little bit more of a suggestion of setting, and kind of give more context to this girl looking through the binoculars. But the character herself is really fun, and I love the energy of the pencil and the line work. This little guy, the bird that's kind of looking at her, looking a little puzzled. It feels like we need a little more context to understand why is he puzzled. I guess perhaps this is a piece in a story, and the story would sort of help us understand, like at this point of the story, what the relationship between the bird and the girl is, and why the bird is puzzled at her looking through the binoculars. But he's a pretty cute little guy, and drawn so simply, but he has character, and he has the gesture, and you can tell, he's kind of scratching his head and wondering what's going on. Okay, keep going. So this is Karen Enright, and it's a really intriguing boy letting a dove fly over the barbed wire. A very narrative piece. There's you know that there's a story there, and you can kind of infer a lot of story from this one piece, just by the setting and the boy's gesture, the boy and the bird, and the presence of the barbed wire. If you imagine this piece without the barbed wire, it's a completely different story. It's telling a completely different story, but you have the barbed wire there, it's interesting, her choice to place the barbed wire like right, between us and the characters.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, an interesting point of view. There's like a few little technical things. I'm wondering about the light. He seems to be coming from the shadowy sort of place. There seems to be light on top of his head, where that's shining on his hair. They're giving it kind of a glimmer, but that seems to be a different light from what's on his face. His face doesn't have a lot of shadow, and it seems a little bit, the face just seems a little bit out of place, like in terms of the lighting and the shadows, compared to to what's around it. I would expect there to be more drama of the lighting, and is the lighting coming? It seems to be coming from above. I would just ask the illustrator to think about the light source, and to add more drama to it would add even more drama to this already arresting sort of piece if you bring in more dramatic kind of lighting to it. And you have the opportunity with the dove wings, how beautiful it could be to have light on those dove wings. So let's see. So this is a cute piece. It just makes you laugh like right away. You just get the sense of character and situation just almost immediately of this squirrel just being a little bit overly ambitious with the acorns. I really like how he's drawn with this this black pencil, and then the way that the acorn caps are done is the texture is really nice. The level of detail is really nice. And I appreciate that I think it was done, I can tell a little bit that there was some digital work done like here at the ears. Like you can see that there's a pretty sharp kind of gap here that sort of gives away that the squirrel might have been placed like over the background, which is, it's fine to do that, but just don't be aware of those things and try to give it maybe a more natural sort of transition of background and foreground when you do that. The eye also looks a little fuzzy. That's another thing working digitally, is thinking about resolution and sharpness, because that can also give you away. There's such a nice sharpness to his nose and his snout here, but the eye, for some reason, looks a little fuzzy. And I don't know if that's intentional or not, but the acorns are pretty sharp. But I kind of wonder about the eye there. Yeah, and I like the way the shadows are done here. That that grounds the piece, even if it was put over the background digitally. You bring in the shadow; it helps ground it. And I like this more abstract kind of background with this more detailed foreground objects and a different palette. It really helps focus the eye on the action and on what's important, but you still get the context of the setting. So so I think this is a nicely successful piece. Let's see. Terry Murphy. It's a really interesting style. It's not something that I see very often, this kind of style. It just feels very personal. I like all the texture, and then this really interesting way of doing this figure. And then you have this underground, it's kind of a cutaway perspective where you have these skeletons kind of dancing up from underneath the surface, and the fish bones. Only thing I would say is that it does seem a little unfocused. Like, what is the action that I'm meant to focus on? There's a lot going on up here with the flower. Like, we have the skeletons dancing down here, and then we have this big flower. Something seems to be dropping from it, and then she's throwing the seeds, I guess, back down to the ground. But I'm not sure which action as a viewer I'm supposed to be focused on. And I'm not sure if this piece here, this kind of orange piece that's on her foot, is that a bird? It's not quite clear what that is. If it's a bird, where are the wings? So without the flower and without the bird, it would be a clearer piece to kind of parse. But there needs to be a way to kind of clarify what the action of this piece is what the focus of the action is meant to be. Let's see. So a very sweet little piece here. A mouse looking in through the window. It's a snowy scene. The light is coming in. I'd like to see the light be even more dramatic. If you're in a dark forest at night with the the snow falling, I would expect it to be the contrast between exterior and interior to be sharper, even though there's like a little lantern here. I would like to see more drama brought with the lighting. Very sweetly done mouse character here with the scarf and the mittens. And I'm not sure what's going on. I guess those are mushrooms with the snow on them. They're a little hard to read, these mushrooms. And I kind of wonder about mushrooms sprouting in in a snowy scene like this. They add a nice little pop of color, but it's a little mysterious. I don't know if it's part of the story to have the mushrooms in the snow like that. The stars, I like the idea of having the stars there, but they look a little too regular, almost like they could be like stamped. So I would want to see them more hand-hewn, and I mean the mouse herself has such a nice line quality. To just keep everything with that kind of very hand-done sort of feeling to it. Yeah, very sweet. Okay. Let's see. This is a really interesting palette that's used here. Very sophisticated with the gray. The orangey color, the blue. It kind of has a very sophisticated feel to it, and I like the mirror here used for the typesetting. It does kind of, it's a very obviously digital, the piece. Which these days you don't want to give yourself away too much. It's good to have that balance of hand done and digital. What I really love best about this piece is the palette and then the little details on the armoire here, the ornaments. The girl herself. It's funny. She kind of reminds me that Mark Fearing is an illustrator who works digitally, and she kind of reminds me of one of his characters. Yeah, she's, there's something a little stiff about her, a little doll-like, a little too doll-like. I'm not quite sure that she's going to move, that she's going to, get up of her own will. Like, she just doesn't feel quite alive somehow as a character. And then there's the drops on the window, which it looks like it's some sort of digital effect, but that too sort of feels a little it feels too much like a digital effect. It doesn't have that organic quality to that gives it creates part of the world of the of the scene here. It feels sort of imposed on it. But I do like these little details of the interior, the wallpaper, the armoire, the panels on the walls. This is someone who really has an eye for interiors and atmosphere. But I would like them to work on the vitality of their characters, and to not go too far with the digital elements, and to really work on bringing in more, not giving a piece away so much as a digital piece. Okay, let's see. Hung Up on You by Dennett Wyatt. This is really cute. What is that creature? Is it a
lemur?
A lemur, yeah, it's a lemur. So this has like that hand hewn sort of. I'm not sure if it was done digitally. There's probably some digital work at least done on it, but it has like a very hand hewn quality to it, because of the texture. You have some wonderful watercolor texture here, in the water and on the lemur's fur. There's just great texture, really nice line work. You have the gesture of the two characters that communicates the affection. I'm not sure if that's the lemur's tail, or if there's one arm around the boy's waist, but then I'm not sure if that's his tail. I guess that must be his tail.
It looks like it. Hard to say, but
yeah,
both tail and arm.
Yeah, that can be a little hard to parse. And it's a very active sort of gesture. Like they're hanging from a branch on a tree, but they're so relaxed. And it's funny because there's tension. The root word of tension is like, to sort of be hanging. But the boy is there's like seems to be so little tension in the boy's face, and he's just like wrapped in the arms of this lemur. So I kind of wonder if something more could be done there with the reality of like that situation of hanging from a tree, to bring a little more energy, especially on the boy's part. That he's just almost unrealistically
kind of weightless,
relaxed. yeah. But I love the little spot of pink here with the parrot, and then the waterfall in the background. It might add a little more movement, actually, to have some of the water, the foam sort of splashing up a little bit more, and a little bit more of like the water, the movement of the water as it flows from the waterfalls. I love the hand lettering. The hand lettering is really fun, and especially how it plays like around the branch like that. That's really neat. And hand lettering is, I'm especially fond of hand lettering. It feels so much more organic to the art to have like the hand lettering on a piece of art rather than a font that's kind of floating on top of it. So
If this was sent to you on a postcard as kind of an example of a mock-up cover, is that a kind of a thing you would like to see sent your way for as an art sample, or do you like to
yeah,
see mocked up covers? Like,
yeah,
I'm assuming it's a cover.
yeah. The title feels a little small for a cover, but I think it gives a nice example of what you can do with hand lettering, and I think it could work for a chapter book, like a chapter book cover, or an early reader cover.
Yeah, with that aspect ratio and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think the title, an art director would probably want the title to be bigger, and then you would need like a place for the author's name.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Really
yeah.
go all the way, make it a title.
Yeah,
I mean, a cover.
exactly. So that it's obviously meant to be a cover. Yeah. Yeah, really sweet piece. Okay, so let's see this piece.
Patty said it looks like a sloth to me, and I think that's the animal we were both thinking of, Abby. It's not more than a lemur, huh?
Not a lemur, a sloth. Okay.
Yeah, that's much more accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, thank you. Yeah.
I like the combination of collage and art and ink work here. It's really fun to see like this this netting brought in, and then the hair too. And then the fluidity of the line is really nice. Her shoes feel pretty big in proportion to her. I know she kind of has this sloppy shoe look going. And then there's so much detail in her wardrobe. In the shirt, you have the texture. The shoes, you have the laces and the little holes for the laces. But then in her face, there's so little detail. There's just the two eyes, the dot for the nose and the dot for the mouth. It feels kind of at odds with all the detail that's going on in the rest of the piece. I mean, the hair even has like so much detail and texture. So it feels a little like there's a disconnect between the style of the face and then the rest of the piece. Okay, how are we doing on time?
Well, we're over time, so you're being very gracious to us. You want to take one or two more, and maybe one or two more questions? Have you got time for that, Abby? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let's see. So this piece, I wish I could get a little closer to it because it's showing up kind of small on my screen.
Oh. Can you control plus it and maybe enlarge it a little bit?
Let's see.
Virginia might have submitted a small piece. Control, that works on my PC. It may not work on your computer, but you guys can do that. Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay. Might start to lose this resolution, but
yeah, I wish I could see it a little more closely. I like how dynamic this piece is. There's a lot of movement going on, a lot of different postures. You have the girl reaching up, the boy reaching down, this boy reaching down, this boy, there's all these different gestures, which gives the piece a lot of energy. This boy here, I'm not sure, it's hard to tell with the resolution, but he seems to have, there seems to be more detail in terms of like his hair. I would make sure that the details are consistent in the characters. There almost seems to be like different styles of
renderings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure what this figure is here, this red on the left here, if that's another boy, another child. And I wouldn't think he would be necessary for the of the piece. He sort of feels like he's taking away. And then this girl here, I'm not sure. She seems to kind of be stuck there. It feels like she needs to recede more behind this figure here in front of her. She's kind of like at the same level, on the same plane as this figure here, and it feels like she would need to be more at the foot of the tree. There's some really nice texture going on here with the tree. I love the texture of the bark. So maybe one more piece. Let's see. So this really beautiful face here, beautiful detail of the face of the man walking. And so much detail in his hair, the way that his hair is done, the beads hanging down. I'd like to see the same level of detail in the boy's face. The boy doesn't seem to have, the boy seems a little more cartoony in the way that his eyes are done. And just doesn't have the same sort of realism as the man's face. I can tell this has been done digitally, maybe in Corel Painter. It kind of has that look to it. So again, like as with some of the other pieces, you don't want the medium to be the first thing that the viewer notices. That the first thing I kind of I kind of thought when I looked at this piece was, oh, it's a digital piece. It puts the medium like front and center instead of the subject and the storytelling. So it feels like there needs to be the illustrator needs to do more work to incorporate her, to dominate the medium rather than having the medium dominate her work. I mean, I really like the birch trees here and the some of the detail going on with the birch trees. But it just feels like there needs to be more incorporation of the of this beautiful line work and the and you can have more vague settings, more abstract kind of settings behind these very detailed figures, but just the digital quality of it is much too apparent on this one.
Okay.
Okay.
That was a power critique. That was wonderful. While I'm waiting for the screen to refresh, Abby, are you up for seeing picture or image submissions at the agency, and if so, how would you like to see them? I know Red Fox is closed to manuscript, unsolicited manuscript submissions right now, unless they meet you at a conference and you really fall in love with their sample chapters or something that you're critiquing at a conference. But can they send art to you?
Yeah, definitely. Anyone participating in the Google Hangout today, it can be free to submit their portfolio to me at Abigail at redfoxliterary.com. It's my email address, ABIGAIL at redfoxliterary, all one word, .com. And what I need is a link to your website, and
okay.
I'm looking for a good array of samples, at least 15 or so samples, picture book oriented samples to look at.
The link, and not you don't want to be inundated with postcards and paper and things like that, or even we don't want to send PDFs to you. You're just saying a link out to your online presence, wherever that.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do prefer a website to a blog. With blogs, you kind of have to page through to find samples. And, you know, a lot of people blog like pieces in progress or photographs, and so it kind of takes a while to really get a sense of what they're doing now and what's current. And
You can, of course, you can make a blog. You can turn a blog into a gallery, portfolio gallery.
You can, yeah.
But would that be okay if there's like portfolio on the
on the blog? Yeah.
On the blog.
I just need to be able to go to a link and to see a good representation of the work they're doing now.
Yeah, great. Okay, good. I want to look for one more question from the group. And do you have something you'd like us to put in the subject line of that email that we send you away?
Good question.
You could just say GGC for guest group critiques as a secret.
Let's do GGC.
GGC. Okay, great. Guys, this is a great time to type your thank yous in for Abigail. The thank yous have already been coming in, Abby. And I'll send you the link so you can read them on the page while they're still up. And the replay will be up probably as soon as we click close on the Hangout session. Abby, this has been a wonderful session. This is the first time we really talked to an editor about manuscripts, you know, editing, the whole editing thing. And we couldn't have found a better person to talk to us about that than you. I'm going to put a link out to the article you wrote. Huh?
It was lovely.
I'm going to put a link out to your article where you talk about what you like to see in portfolios, and you wrote this. You were guest interviewed on the Mamakin blog, and and it was really interesting. And you said you got kind of the same thing as you told us today. Have a voice, your own voice. You got to find that as an illustrator to be attractive to you. Although you do say in that piece that different things appeal to different editors and houses and art directors.
It's very subjective.
Very subjective. And then you said master your medium so that you're really singing in that medium's unique voice or expression. And then the other thing was just the basics, have the basics down, proportion, color, just the things that show. And I can't remember what, did you say something? Well, I'll send the link out. You can all read it. It was a wonderful piece. Kind of what she was saying today. Clarity, communication, all those important things that are important to an editor particularly.
Yes.
You know? So she's wearing both hats. She's wearing all these hats. And a writer, you know, she's got triple threat. And
a mom.
And a mom.
Which is the hardest of all.
Is that the hardest of all? That's your best work right there, huh?
Yes, my masterpieces.
Your masterpiece. Wonderful. Thank you so much for this. You went over with us and you gave us real generous time. And stay on with me for just a second, but I will close the broadcast out now, and we will catch you guys on the next adventure in a few weeks. Abigail, thank you so much. And we'll say good night and happy Valentine's week to all of you watching, and to you, Abby. Good night.
Bye, everyone.